All right, so today we're going to go over 1-3, which would be midpoint and distance formula. Now, we're going to spend a couple days on this, making sure that we really know it before we move on. So today, I'm going to give you both formulas. We'll kind of talk about a couple things from each one, and then we'll start. We're really going to practice midpoint first, okay? But I'm going to go over distance formula with you first, and then just so we have that written down, and then we'll kind of talk about the others, okay? All right. Distance formula, we're going to write in the blank here. So the first thing we're going to put is a radical sign, which is just a fancy word that means what? No. Starts with an S. Circumference does not start with an S.
That's embarrassing.
That is called a what? It's a radical, but it's also called taking the... Ooh, you guys, come on. We know this. Somebody said it.
Square root.
Square root, thank you. Woo. We can tell it's a Monday. Okay, so we're going to put a square root sign. We just need it to go on for a while because we got to put a lot of information underneath there. Okay, so when we talk about distance formula, we're finding the distance between 2 points, right? Well, how do we name any point? Using two things that are called what? We name any point using what?
A comma.
Well, you do need a comma, but what are those two numbers called?
Points.
They are both points, but how do we name a point on a coordinate plane?
X and Y.
There we go. Come on, some of us are getting there. Okay, so if I have 2 points, we would call this x1, y1, and then my second point would be x2, y2. Now, for some of you, this is going to start coming back to you because you have seen it before. We did it in pre-algebra. You may have touched on it a little bit in algebra, but mostly I think we do it in pre-algebra. Okay, so to find the distance, we're going to take our second x value, so our x2, and subtract our first x value, x1, and then we're just going to square both of those numbers. And then we add the same thing but with y. So y2 minus y1 squared. So just as a reminder, x1 and y1, x2 and y2 are points on the graph or your coordinate plane. And then those are the points we're going to use to find the distance between those 2 points. Okay? All right, so you can flip to the back side. We're going to look at a couple examples of this. Okay, so I'm not going to read over all of that information where it says important points and finding the distance because we kind of just talked about some of that stuff, okay? And you guys can read those things. Now, on example 1, it says find the distance between point A and point C. Now, some of us are going to try to just be like 1, 2, 3. Why does that not work? Would it work if A was right here?
Yep.
Yes, right? We can count straight across. We can count straight up, but you cannot count when it's at an angle, okay?
Sure.
So we have to use distance formula to find those two things. So the first thing we want to do is just write down what are those two ordered pairs. So can someone tell me what the ordered pair is for point A? I know it's a little hard to see, but surely we can count and find point A.
Three
3, 7 is close, but not correct. 3, -7 is correct. Okay, so point A is going to be at 3, -7. What about point C? 0 and 3. Yeah, 0, 3. Okay, so if you'll write your points on like one on top of the other, it'll kind of be easy for you once you get to the rest of the problem. Okay, so on this first one, I'm going to go ahead and write the problem first. So distance is equal to the square root of x2 minus x1, squared that, plus y2 minus y1. Okay, so the easiest way is to just start with whatever point is listed underneath and write that point and subtract the one that's listed on top of it. Okay, so what would be my value for x2? 0 minus, what's my value for x1, the one right above it? 3. Okay, and then we're going to square that. And then we're just, oh my gosh. Then we're just doing the same thing with our y values. Start with the point that's underneath and subtract the one that's on top of it. So what's the second y value? 3. And then we're going to subtract what number from that? -7. Make sure we put both of those double negative signs. Sorry, that blue's a little hard to see. Okay, from here, it should just be simple math, right? We're going to do 0 minus 3. What is 0 minus 3? Okay, so I have -3 still in parentheses, squared, plus, what should happen to this double negative here? They both become positive. So then I just have 3 plus 7, which is 10. Okay, now, hopefully we can do this. You guys know, anytime we square a number, it's going to be what type of answer? Somebody over there said it. Positive, right? Because any number times itself is always going to be positive. Isn't a negative times a negative a positive? Yes, so any number squared is going to be positive. So -3 times -3 is going to give you what? 9 plus, what's 10 squared? 10 times 10? 100. Okay, last step is just to add those together, and I get the square root of 109. Now, it is most of the time going to want you to go ahead and type that in your calculator, and then we'll round to the nearest tenth. So somebody type that in your calculator for me. And tell me what we get.
4.408.
What?
Huh?
Okay, so yeah, 10.4, right? Because we're going to round to the nearest tenth. All right, so when it asks you to find AC, the measure of AC is about 10.4. Now, notice I use a little squiggly equal sign because it's not exactly equal to 10.4. Yes? Okay. Now, here's the deal. Most of the time, these problems aren't overly difficult. You just have to be careful that you put the points in the right place. Correct? Okay, so let's try the second one. So on the second one, instead of giving you a graph, it just gives you the 2 points, right? So our x and y, my first point is -1, 4, and then -3, -4. Now, I'm not even going to make you write out the formula every single time, okay, because we're going to kind of get used to it. But we're subtracting our x values, so which x value would I start with here? -3, the one on the bottom, we subtract the one on the top. So -3 minus what? -1. Okay, what comes right after that is parentheses? Squared. Now, if you want to go ahead and change those to a positive, because you know that's what it's going to be, I'm great with that. Okay, then I'm going to subtract my y values. What's my first y value? Or my second one, sorry. -4 minus -4? Minus just 4. Okay, then for the most part, we don't even need our calculator here, right? What's -3 plus 1? -2 is correct. So I get -2 squared plus, what's -4 minus 4? -8 squared. Okay, now again, we just have to square those numbers. So -2 squared would give me 4. What about -8 squared? 64. Okay, When I add those together, I get square root of 68, which is about, or approximately, 8.2. Okay. Not too bad on that part, yes? Okay, let's talk about midpoint. Anybody still writing that down? Okay, so when we talk about midpoint, now let me remind you of this real quick. When I found the distance, was the distance an ordered pair? My final answer was an ordered pair, yes or no? No. My final answer was what? A single number, right? Because we're talking about the distance between 2 points. Now, here's the other thing I didn't talk about. Can the distance between 2 points ever be negative? No, it's impossible, right? It'll always be positive, okay? Now, when we talk about midpoint, what word do you see there? Point, right? Okay, so it is a point on the line that is in the middle of two other points, okay? Sometimes, well, I'll talk about that in a second, okay? So if I'm going to name 2 points, I have to have 2 commas or 2 parentheses separated by a comma. Now, all we're basically doing is just finding the average, right? So how do you find the average of 2 things? If I have 2 things, how would I find the average of them? I will divide by 2, but I have to do something to those 2 things first. If you have 2 grades in the grade book and it wants the average, what's it going to do with those 2 grades first? Add them together, correct? And then it's going to divide by 2. So that's exactly what we're doing with our 2 values, our x1 and our x2. We're going to add them together and then take half of them. So then what do you think we're doing with our 2 y values? Same thing. We're adding them together and taking half, okay? So we're finding the average of the 2 points. Now, we're going to go and put this on here, even though we won't use it till later, but a segment bisector is just a line that passes through the midpoint. So if I have a line segment, and I know the midpoint is exactly in the middle, what do I know about those 2 segments between them? We talked about this last week. We did a whole problem on this. What do I know about these 2 segments? Yeah, they're the same. They're equal. Also, what's the quickest way to know that? Yeah, the 2 lines that we marked, okay? So we know that they're equal. So what a segment bisector does is it's just a line that passes through that midpoint. Okay, just so we've at least seen that, that way when we kind of come back and talk about that later, you'll have an idea of what that is, okay? All right. Okay, so if I want to find the midpoint of these 2 points, I'm going to use my midpoint formula, right? So obviously on these, they don't give you what the ordered pairs are, so we've got to write those down first. So somebody tell me, what's my ordered pair for point B? 6 and what? Nope. 2. I know, it's a little bit hard to tell on this graph. And then what about point D? -8, negative 4. Good. Okay. Now, again, all we're going to do are add the two x values and take half, add the two y values and take half. So what are my two x values? Okay, so negative 8 plus 6, and I'm going to take half of that. What about my y values? Negative 4 plus 2. Now again, you don't have to do that on this one, but it's just good practice to always start with your second one and then go to the first, because that way when you get to distance formula, you're just used to that pattern. Okay? All right, what is negative 8 plus 6? Negative 2. Still dividing that by 2. What is negative 4 plus 2? Also negative 2. Okay, so all I have to do is divide each of those numbers by 2, and I get what? So negative 1, negative 1. So now, do I know exactly where my midpoint is located on that graph? Yes. So I could put that midpoint, negative 1, right there. Okay. What time do we got here? 34? All right. I'll try to go quick on this one. Okay, it says M is the midpoint of AB. Find the coordinate of B if the coordinate of A is 3, 7, and the midpoint is 5, 10. So this one's a little different, right? Because on the first one, it gave us the two endpoints, and it asked us to find the midpoint. So on this one, if it gives us the midpoint, can I use these two and plug those into the formula that I just used? No, right? It wouldn't work. Because then, let me draw this picture real quick, because that'll probably help us see this. So let's say this is AB, right? So A is at 3, 7. And then it tells us our midpoint is here at 5, 10. So what happens is, if I use those 2 points and plug in the formula I just got, I'm going to find the midpoint of AM, which isn't what I want. It wants me to find what were the original coordinates of point B. Now, am I still going to use the formula I gave you? Yes, we're just going to do it a little differently. Okay? So, in the formula, we're going to start with the point given, the first point, right? What was the x value of that first point, point A? 3. So I'm going to take 3 plus my x2, because I don't know the other x value, and divide it by 2. But when I do that, what x value should that be equal to? 5, right? Because it's given us the answer. So we're going to take what we know and set it equal to 5. Okay, and then I'm going to do the same thing with my y value. What's the y value that it already gave us, my y1? 7 plus y2, because that's what we're trying to find. And that should be equal to the midpoint value for y, which was 10. Now, all you're doing from here is solving two equations. Do we know how to solve equations? Say yes, because we do. On both equations, what's the first thing I have to do to get rid of the division of 2? Multiply both sides by 2. Okay, so let's just work with x first. If I multiply both sides by 2, that cancels, correct? And I'm left with 3 plus x2 is equal to what? 10, right? 5 times 2, because we multiplied both sides. Now, can't I easily find my x-coordinate just by doing what? How can I find my x-coordinate? I want to get x2 by itself. There we go. Subtract 3 from both sides. So my x2, my coordinate for point B, is going to be equal to 7. Okay? Sorry, I know I wrote this kind of close. We're doing the same thing on the other side. How do I get rid of this 2 down here? Multiply both sides by 2. I know it's a little bit messy. I apologize. So those are going to cancel. What are you left with? 7 plus y2 equal to 20. And then my last step to get y2 by itself, subtract 7. So y2 is equal to 13. Now, do I have both coordinates I need to make my ordered pair? So what is my ordered pair for point B? Okay. Now, that one's a little bit different, so when you see those type of problems, you just got to be careful on those, okay? All right. If you want to fold that now and then glue that into your notebook, because that's your next page of notes, you can do that. Remember, you're folding that front page in to where those two meet in the middle, and then there's room on the back. Like, notice we have nothing on the back here, so you could glue that to the top of your paper on your next page of notes, okay?